What is path to agility? So the first thing is what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And the number one problem is when we survey folks around what's the state of agility. Our survey results are showing that we've got uh, what we see 29% of what we define as superficial agility, like people who are going through the motions, putting agile lipstick on a waterfall pig, but not really, they're still probably working as waterfall as they ever were. They're carrying over scope from sprint to sprint, things like that. So we got about 30% stuck in this kind of superficial state. 51% where we call this improving agility, like they're trying to get better, but they maybe haven't achieved the real benefits that Agile promises. And then we get to 17 or about 15% that are in predictable agility, 5% ish that are in fast agility. And that's a pretty sad state of affairs. So we got 20% have actually like achieved a state of something truly better, right? More predictable. And when we talk about predictability, we're not talking about we know exactly what we're going to deliver 6 months from now. It's not that we have a crystal ball, but that we have a predictable cadence of delivery. And we didn't even put up in this survey our fifth stage of path to agility because we're not really getting even to enough to the fast stage. And so we're going to talk about why that's happening, but this is for the problem that we're trying to attack, right? We're trying to, we just still see more bad Agile than good Agile in a lot of enterprises. A lot of people that are just kind of, phoning it in a little bit, right? Like they doing safe and, but they don't necessarily even have good level team agility, but they're launching arts, right? Things like that. So we're going to talk about how can we get through this and what are some of the reasons why companies are getting stuck. Number one reason why we think companies are really struggling is that we think they're oriented to the wrong goal. We think that most companies, if this makes sense to you, are what we're calling, are doing agile implementations as opposed to focusing on getting to the results. And so they're like, if we just implement everything in the picture, then we'll be agile. And that picture could be the safe picture, a Scrum picture, right? Pick any implementation framework out there. We have way more documentation in the agile space around the practices. And so it's not surprising that people are latching onto the how and doing those things. But we have that joke in the agile land about like, are you doing agile or are you being agile? And so what's happening is they're going through the motions, they're mimicking, right? It's like I'm trying to do all the things, but they're not necessarily getting the right or developing the right new capabilities in the organization or achieving the outcomes that they really desire. So what we do is first with Path to Agility is orient around what's the outcome we're trying to achieve, and then map backwards from that to say, all right, from that outcome, what capabilities do we need to develop? From those capabilities, what practices would support that? So we're going to work backwards from the outcome, as opposed to let's just implement all the practices and hope that we get the outcome, right? And that's what we're seeing a lot. The second pattern we've seen over the years is that many transformations over the last 10, 15 years have been focused mostly on the team level, just, implementing Scrum. Like until the advent of the scaling frameworks, just over 5 years ago, most everything that we did from an enterprise level transformation, when you really dug into it, was really just team level agility. And anybody that's been involved in that realizes you get to a ceiling really fast, right? Like you can go help a team, but if you're not working on the system that the team's working in or the organizational dynamic, and, as Agilists, we talk about mindset and culture and leadership a lot, right? Without those pieces, we're not going to get very far. So that's the second problem we see. The third problem we see is that people thinking, I can just learn the new process and then we'll be good. We're smart people. Why don't you just train us? We'll go to a 2-day class and then we'll apply it. Well, the challenge with Agile is it isn't a prescriptive. The good and the bad of Agile is it's not a prescriptive process. There isn't a one way to do it. And so therefore we can't just train you on this is the one way and then you just implement, a prescriptive solution, because it isn't. It's meant to be adaptable to your organization. But what that means is it's a lot harder to then apply and implement, right? Because you then need to say, okay, given these principles, given these kind of concepts, I've then got to figure out how's it going to work best in this environment. And so having coaching support for people that have been through that process before, who have seen that, who have experiences, to bring with the training. Right, training's still important, but if you just do training, you're kind of armed and very dangerous. Like, so we gotta get coaching along with that. Number 4 is about, do we have the business or our customer kind of involved? If we're talking about an IT transformation, do we have our business counterpart as part of it? And or if we're talking about HR, are we getting our customer, from even an internal customer perspective, involved? Because we're trying to optimize that whole value chain. And we can't optimize the whole value chain if we're just focused on, a portion of it, which gets to number 5, which is optimizing the full value stream, focusing on that at a system level, not just at a team level, across all these pieces. So these are the top 5 things we're seeing as patterns over and over again, that organizations are, why they're struggling, and why we see that, 80% are in that superficial or improving kind of agility. So if we flip this around and we look at, like, what are keys to success, number 1 ties with the number 1 before, which is, business outcomes are the goal. We got to focus on, is it about speed? Is it about market responsiveness, customer sat, like employee engagement? What are the things that we're really trying to focus on? We got to orient around that first. Leaders have to lead the change. It doesn't start at the team level. It's got to start at the leadership level. The biggest shift we're seeing in an enterprise is number 3, which is switching from a project mindset to a product mindset or a value-driven mindset. So number 3 is really critical. Most of our clients fall into one of 2 buckets, either IT enterprise space or software product space. Software products don't have number 3 as a problem, right? Like, they've been product driven. That's what they do. That's in their DNA. But at the IT enterprise, product is the software product is a new concept. And there's so many different things that are rooted in that, that problem, space, like, dependency on project-based funding, that then leads to things like high dependency on outsourcing your development, as opposed to, if you think about it from a product and a long-standing product, well, then you would say, well, we should invest in that IP as our core team, right? So it starts to create all sorts of different dynamics. Number 4 is about, like, organizational change management. Is there a method to our madness? Are we thinking about this? Because this is impacting the organization. We need to think about managing change, with individuals, with the company, structurally, all those types of things. It involves the whole org. So, if you're, a lot of our work is in IT, but, if you're talking about IT, well, that's going to impact finance. That's going to impact HR. It's going to impact the business. If you're talking about, marketing, you're going to still need HR and finance and other things involved in that. And then number 6 is critical. Too often, we see enterprise transformation, especially when they, like, hire an outside consultant, thinking, okay, well, we'll be done in like 3 to 6 months. And you may only have 3 to 6 months where you're going to burst up with kind of outside help. But what's critical is, like, we pride ourselves in our jobs to work ourselves out of a job. So we start looking as soon as we show up on day 1, who are we going to be handing things off to? Who are people that we're going to try and, like, train the trainer or train the coach and up level in the organization, who are going to carry this baton forward? Because it's surely not a 3 to 6 month journey. It could be a 3 to 6 year journey for some enterprises. So are you building that internal coaching capacity or capability within your organization. So those are what we see are the 6 keys. And so what Path to Agility is providing is to help with those 6 keys, to provide guidance for the Agile transformation that's outcome based, and it gives you a way. It's kind of like, how do you know what's the next step to take if you don't know where you are, right? So the first thing we got to do is we're providing a map for you to be able to kind of say, where are we? So that we can then say and orient around that, and then say, what is our goal? What's our outcome we're trying to get to? How can we assess where we currently are, so that then we can determine what are the next steps that we need to take in order to start continuing to move and make progress towards the goal that we have set. That's what we're trying to provide with Path to Agility. We're trying to take a lot of the intelligence that we've developed as coaches over the decades of experience, and get that kind of codified a little bit, so that people who are new, like those people that were building that internal coaching capability, who are maybe on their first transformation, can have some of that intelligence, to guide them through that, and kind of guide the journey. So let's start looking at some of the different elements of Path to Agility. So the first thing here is what we call the 9 business outcomes. So this is the first thing that we do with leaders, is do an exercise around these 9 business outcomes. And I'll encourage you to post in the chat, what if you had to pick one of these for your company as like the number one North Star? This is the reason why we're trying to improve, and we're doing an Agile transformation. Which of these 9? If you want to post that in the chat. What's the one that you think is the biggest driver? What's the most important thing? And so as we start to look at these, what you'll spot is that there's some dependency amongst these, right? Like one can lead to another, one can unlock another thing. And so I see, and so what we start to outline as we walk through it. So first, it creates a really interesting conversation with leaders, because as you'd imagine, their first response is, well, I want all of them, right? And it's like, well, we can try and achieve all of them, but what are we going to focus on now, right? Like, what are we going to try and achieve this year or in the next 3 to 6 months? So once we start creating that time horizon, what's the next thing that we should emphasize, is one conversation we'll have. And then, as you'd also imagine, if you got 6 different leaders in the room, do you think all 6 are going to choose the same thing? No. But do you think it's important that when we walk out of the room, that all 6 people are talking about the same thing to try and motivate and rally the troops around this change initiative? Yes. So what we see with this is that this dependency, we start thinking about this. And so I saw, a couple of votes for customer sat, market responsiveness, predictability. And what we start to see when we map out kind of the dependency here is to say, well, employee engagement is one of those foundational things that unlocks a lot of others. So if we have an employee engagement problem, that might be the thing that we need to emphasize in the near term to be able to get to predictability and market responsiveness and customer sat. Ultimately, all of these should impact customer sat in some way positively, right? So customer sat is maybe the ultimate goal. At the end of the day, are we delivering value? Are we maximizing value? Is everybody happy with what we're doing? But customer sat can be a lagging indicator, right? So it may take a while, depending on, like, if we have quality problems are causing us speed problems are causing us market responsiveness problems, and because we're not being responsive, we have customer sat problems. So again, depending on where we're at, it starts to help us define what is the thing that we need to emphasize. So we might say customer sat is our ultimate goal, but in the short term, we need to focus on quality and speed, right? That may be where some of that conversation starts to go. So we start with those business outcomes. And like I said, we take the business outcomes, and then what we're going to share with you in a second are 30 Agile outcomes that we've identified in the big Path to Agility map. Those 30 Agile outcomes break down into about 100 Agile capabilities within that. that then we will start looking at what practices. So if you kind of connect the dots here, again, we start with business outcomes, and Path to Agility is defining the first three elements here. We define business outcomes, agile capabilities. We leave flexibility to what are the right practices. There's an infinite number of practices and agile practices in the world. And there's no one best way of doing agile. It depends on the environment. So we can all agree that we want to shorten cycle time as an important thing from a capability, that teams have a shortened cycle time or faster time to value. But the how you get there could be different depending on the team. Some teams Kanban might be the better practice to apply. Some teams Scrum might be the better practice to apply. Some teams may need more DevOps capabilities in order to satisfy that capability. So the practices are flexible, and we don't define those. Path to Agility, we're not defining those, but we are defining the top three here: business outcomes, agile capabilities. And I'm going to walk you through those. So when we look at an agile transformation, an agile transition, agile adoption, agile maturity, whatever word you want to use, we've first got to think about the change curve that's happening. And while we all, the best way of seeking any of this is evolutionary change, right? Like, we're not going to do a big bang, plan it all out. We're not going to waterfall our agile transformation. So when we think about it, we're going to introduce significant amount of change in each area, that if we start to plot kind of the normal change curve, right? We think about what happens is that we go into this phase of what we call chaos and resistance, which is a natural human reaction. As leaders and change agents, we got to understand that we're causing this on others, that change is difficult. It's fear, it creates stress. And it's a natural reaction because we just changed the rules on everybody, right? We used to say, like, take a Scrum, somebody wasn't a Scrum Master and now is being told they're going to be a Scrum Master. And they're like, hey, I'm excited about this new opportunity, but I've never been one before. So I'm going to be a little fearful and scared because I knew how to be a hero in my old world. I got a really big bonus last year because I was great at my old job. I don't know if I'm going to be great at this yet because I don't know the rules. And so we've got to create support and safety for people going through the change. And this is where, again, it's not just training, but also coaching and support. We've got to create that safety and support to help them get through this kind of dip and into integration and practice. So I see the value of coaches. I see the value of Path to Agility is to help organizations accelerate through this change curve and reduce the risk of how deep they go. That's the value that we bring to the table. And so what we've done is we've mapped 5 core stages to the Path to Agility, and it starts with align. And at align, what we're talking about is, are we aligned around the why? Does everybody understand it? Is it creating a sense of urgency? Are we communicating it effectively? Is it motivating and compelling people into action, that they're excited about going after whatever this North Star of, like, we've got to start releasing our product faster and with higher quality, because if we're not going to be responsive to the market and we're going to get beat by our competition, or we're being beat by our competition, right? Whatever that might be. So we've got to align at that level. And then we've got to go into this next stage we call learn, which isn't just about, like, going to the classroom and learning the terminology. More importantly, it's about creating a learning culture of, like, take at a team level. Are we having meaningful retrospectives and taking action and learning how to get better as a team? At a system level, are we figuring out how to optimize the system for flow and other things? At an organizational level, are we identifying impediments to agility and resolving those impediments quickly, right? Are we learning as an organization how to get better? And if we don't, right, what happens? So we're down in this dip. And if we're not learning and we're not getting better, and everything's starting to get really difficult, right? People are getting really stressed out and we're not figuring it out. We're not learning together. Then where do you think everybody's going to want to go? They're going to want to clamor back to the beginning, right? And that's where, back to our stats that we started off with, that's why I believe we have 30% who are at superficial agility, or 50% that are just floundering down in this dip. Part of it's if we're not creating learning culture. Part of it's if we're not aligned around a compelling reason why, when it starts to get difficult, we're going to be like, this sucks, let's go back, right? But if we're compelled by this purpose, then we're going to work through it, right? And we're going to keep trying to persevere through, make the organizational changes that we need to make in order to make that happen, to get to the first kind of stage of success, if you will, is where we start getting more predictable. And predictability is about getting the variability out of the system, right? So we talk a lot about scaling by descaling, reducing the complexity, simplifying the system allows us to get more predictable, right? And because next we want to start delivering faster. And the fourth stage is about accelerate. And if we're not very predictable, when we say go faster, like we're just creating more noise in the system. So we got to get predictable, and then we can start optimizing, right? Because if we don't have good predictability, then our data doesn't really tell us anything. It's too noisy, right? So we got to get predictability first, and then we can start optimizing, because we'll figure out where are the places that are causing the friction, right? Where are the bottlenecks in the system? Where's the bottlenecks in the flow of the system? So predictability is about reducing the complexity, and reducing the variability comes from things like interruptions, changing priorities, quality issues, right? Things like that, production issues, things like that. And then we get to speed with accelerate. And then ultimately we're trying to get to a stage of what we call adapt. And adapt is where we're saying we can sense and respond with the market, right? We can test and learn quickly with the market. Our organization adapts or has resilience based on what's happening in the market, right? I mean, we adapt. All of our organizations had to do some form of adapt this year, right? And potentially even multiple times. And so the question is, how quickly were we able to respond to that? And is that part of our kind of DNA, if you will, of being able to adapt? And are we adapting organizationally? Are we adapting from a product perspective, right? But we can't adapt if we can't deliver, if we can't, if it takes us 6 months to get a feature into production, well, then we have a 6-month product learning cycle. Like, that's not going to allow us to adapt. So accelerate is dependent on things like DevOps. Are we, for IT, are we able to deliver something quickly that we can then test and learn with smaller experiments? But we can't do that if we can't get the variability out. We can't do that if we don't have a learning culture. We won't get through this if we're not aligned around a why. So those are the 5 stages that we look at with Path to Agility. And then we have 3 levels, and you've heard me kind of talking about these. Team level, easy to understand, where most of our energy is in Agile, in the Agile space has gone over the last 20 years. But then we also have the system level, and we're not talking about the technical system. We're talking about the system of teams, the flow of value through the system. It takes multiple teams to get value out the door, typically. And so we need to optimize at that level. And here's where a lot of our scaling practices come into play to help us optimize at the system level. But we also have things from an organizational perspective, right? Are we, from a leadership, are we making the org changes, structure changes that we need to? Are we filling the roles that we need to? Are we funding those? So finance practices, are we still doing project-based funding or product-based funding, investment streams? Are we switching our HR practices from top-down stack ranking to, continuous performance feedback, right? What are the mechanisms that are supporting organizationally the systems and the teams? So when we start to look at these 3 levels and the 5 stages, we start to map out what's appearing now are the 30 Agile outcomes of things that we are saying we're trying to achieve, from an Agile perspective. We're trying to get, teams aligned to value, get a compelling purpose for change, team formation, team agreements, those types of things that align. At learn, are we learning how to empower teams? Are teams taking ownership of their work? At predict, are we leaders? Are we creating focus at a portfolio level? Are we reducing complexity? Are we getting a predictable delivery cadence at a team level? Accelerate. Leaders, are we working in a way where we have decision agility? Are we reducing cycle time, releasing continuously, right? Adapt, gets into things like objective data-driven decisions, customer centricity, purpose-driven leadership, whole org agility, right? So our HR, financial agility, things like that. And so when we start to map all this out, we start to, again, you see the lines showing like there's dependencies across these. So it's not that you got to do everything in align before everything in learn, before everything in predict, but there is a dependency, right? There's a dependency up and down. There's a dependency left to right. And so this starts to help us be able to see where are we? And so what we start to do is we create a heat map like this. So we'll come in, and you can use Path to Agility to assess your current state. And from this current state, it would be like, oh, well, we're pretty good in Align, but we've got some yellow in Learn, and we've got all this red, and the gray is just representing maybe something we didn't assess yet. But that starts to give us a sense of where should we focus next, like where are we, so that we can determine our next step. Now, the other thing I'll show you in a second is the other overlay on this would be, well, what's our business outcome and what are we trying to achieve? And so we'll show you how we start to look at that to also inform what our next steps might be. So you look at that heat map, we think about, here are all the different ways, like if we kind of package these up into higher levels of like, all right, are we focused down in the blue, like team level agility? Are we doing more technical agility? Where is the weak spot, and where are places that you potentially kind of engage with that? And then all of this boils down. I mentioned there was 30 Agile outcomes and then 100 capabilities. So the 100 capabilities show up underneath that into kind of like, we take compelling purpose in the top left there. That breaks down into urgency, created, guiding vision, clear objectives. Those break down into, and then those all have acceptance criteria on them. So there's like 400 acceptance criteria. Again, ways that you could assess, all right, where are we? Do we have this? Do we have this capability? And that's what informs the kind of heat map and the roll up. Here's those business outcomes I was saying. If employee engagement, well, you guys picked predictability was one of the ones that I saw Alex popped up there, right? So if it's predictability, well, then, these would be the, 8 areas that you potentially want to focus on getting to green, if you will, that will move the needle the most on predictability, right? Like those would impact, those correlate the most with predictability. So if those are red, then that might be the place that you should focus, right? Now, if you then, those are red, but you use the dependency lines and you map back to, well, we don't even have teams aligned to value, which it leads to team form, which leads to team ownership. Well, maybe we need to focus on teams aligned to value, right? We can follow that dependency map backwards into there. And so we have, for each of the 9 business outcomes, kind of mapped and looked at what correlates the most with those. Now, what you can do with this is that each of these comes in the concept of a card, right? An Agile outcome. And so we start to build visualization of progress, and kind of, we can do it in a Kanban way. We can do it in the heat map way. We've done some radar charts and other things to showing different kinds of progress. And the other reality is, like, things are going to roll out in waves, right? Especially at enterprise, right? If you've got a large enough organization, as you're kind of rolling things out. And so just kind of showing a couple, we virtualized, we've got, I've got a box of cards here, right? That doesn't really work so well in our COVID world. And so what we've done is we virtualized all that in Mural and Miro. And so we're doing all of these activities. Like on the left, we did a kind of like a dot voting activity to get to, well, what's the number one business outcome with leaders. On the right, we did a exercise where we have everybody kind of vote with green, yellow, and red dots on, assessing where we are. So we've done, taken things like that. Here's a team that is breaking, prioritized. They've prioritized already their top Agile outcome, and now they're tasking out their backlog, right? It's a agile leadership team or a guiding coalition that is now saying, okay, what do we need to go do? What are the tasks that need to happen? And we're kind of doing breakout groups and breaking that work down. Here's a team that was visualizing their kind of agile leadership team, the work that they were doing across that you can see there, the business outcomes matched to the agile outcomes, matched to the stickies are like the tasks that they're doing. And those are kind of the elements of Path to Agility. And then just share a couple things, and then we'll open it up to questions. So if you want to queue up any questions that you have, you can find out more at pathtoagility.com on the website. So pathtoagility.com. And there's 2 workshops that we do. These are both 2 different certifications. So Path to Agility Practitioner is targeting kind of the internal coaches, internal change agents. You don't necessarily have to have any previous transformation coaching experience, but you should come in with some agile experience for sure. So this is, again, could be like a Scrum Master, senior Scrum Master, could be an internal coach. And the next class is on January 28th for that. So that's the Path to Agility Practitioner. And then the Path to Agility Facilitator is geared towards people who are experienced transformation coaches. So this is typically more external coaches. Now there could be some internal coaches who have significant transformation experience, but so they could be leading a transformation, but it's mostly geared towards external experienced consultant transformation coaches who already have that knowledge that they're bringing in, and we're teaching them the Path to Agility product and tool to be able to leverage. And the next class for that is in 7 days. So that one, we split it into 2 half days. So it's next Thursday and Friday. So that is the next opportunity for that. And we do that about every other month. So if 7 days is too short a notice, the next class is coming up as well. And so there's some overlap between those and what you get, but ultimately, again, I mentioned kind of practitioners more for the internal, kind of newer to transformation folks, and facilitator is geared to the experienced transformation coach. The other options are, actually, we should update that, the 50 plus Path to Agility facilitators. There's a network of folks that if you're looking for assistance with Path to Agility, there's the Path to Agility Facilitator Network, as well as you can reach out to us if you're looking for like a private Path to Agility practitioner training, or if you're looking for coaching support for Path to Agility or transformation support, you can reach out to Agile Velocity for that. And I think, and then there's one more thing. So there's also now available enterprise licensing. So if you're looking at wanting to use this across the enterprise, so the practitioner, while that licensed the individual, this would license the organization. And so if you're looking for something from an organizational perspective, then the enterprise licensing would be something to explore for that.